3.5 weeks for me so far, and I've learned a lot. But I've known a lot of you already through my work at Bomb Magazine, and what I've known of the staff here has been inspiring. I've known that you're all hardworking and that the members here are committed, and the board of trustees and the various committee members are incredibly dedicated. So it's a real honor to be a part of this community, and I look forward to the year ahead with everyone. Part of what I'm excited about is building on the momentum of last year's bylaw changes and seeing how we can capitalize on the growth and the expansion of membership, and also to work with all of the directors of PEN to increase visibility for all the programs that are happening at PEN, not just for membership or literary awards, which will be under my domain, but for all of the various programs that are happening here. And it's an exciting year, so I feel like it's the right time to be on board. And I'm going to keep my comments really short. I'm going to now introduce Anthony Appiah, who has been the president of PEN for the last 3 years, and I'm very sorry that we couldn't have worked longer together. But as he said when I met him tonight, hello and goodbye.
Well, it's a sad pleasure to call this meeting to order for the last time as your president, but of course as a continuing member, so I shall be here again. I'll be sitting in the back somewhere. My job is just to invite Steve now to introduce you to the staff. So you all know Steve Eisenberg, our director, executive director. If you don't, you will in 1 second.
Let me start, and they could just raise their hand, and that'd be just a good thing to do rather than having to march up here, because most of them you will hear from later with Robin Desartel, who's our Director of Finance and Administration. And then in the order I'm going to go in now will be the order that they will speak later in the meeting. Jakob Warshos, who's our Director of our Literary Festival and Public Programming, and on his right is his colleague, Beth Weinstein. Larry Seams, who's our Director of Freedom to Write and International Programs, and his colleague, Sarah Hoffman. Linda Morgan, who's our Director of Development, and her colleague, Megan Kyle Miller, who might have gone home to take care of her daughter. This is Emma Conley, who's my executive assistant, and then Antonio Aiello, who's our director of our website, and his colleague, Chuck Loom, who I had to announce this morning has been taken from us by the Open Society Institute. He's going to go there to work on their website, and a large domain started here in 2008 as an intern, which many of the ways by which people move up and through this organization. And then Stacy Lee, our director of our Readers and Writers program. And also in the house, our own colleagues who are interns, and with Larry and Sarah, and I will be mentioning this in my remarks, PEN's first Freedom to Write Fellow, funded by the Ford Foundation, Degiola Katoon. So, back to you, Anthony, to call on our proxies and get the vote.
Good. So the large and important part of what we do at this meeting is to elect a successor, but also a board. And for this purpose, we have appointed two proxies: Rob Stillman, editor of The House and executive editor, Tin House, The House, and executive editor of Tin House Books, who's also a writer, of course, and editor of Gods and Soldiers, the Penguin Anthology of Contemporary African Fiction. Mark Lee, novelist, poet, playwright, journalist, author of The Canal House and The Lost Tribe, many poems and plays, including Private Room, which is set in Guantanamo, which was premiered in London in 2004. Former chair of the Food and Right Committee of PEN USA West, and currently serves with Rob Spillman on the membership committee. They are the proxies. They are in charge of the they're like those people who at the Oscars you come in with the locked briefcase. They're in charge of the security of the vote. So I'm very grateful to them, and they will now. Do you have the? Oh, you've already written the result.
Oh, don't peek at me.
Okay.
You left it up there.
That's very kind. Well, maybe you should, all right. So, the total number of ballots cast was 217. All candidates on the ballot were elected as follows. Peter Godwin, President. John Trove, Executive Vice President. Ron Chano, Vice President. Victoria Riddell, Vice President. John Oakes, Treasurer. Eleanor Lippman, Secretary. Committee Chair, Trustees, Kara Benson, Gregory Pardlow, Susanna Reich, and other trustees, Ed Burlingame. Peter Godwin had to be elected to the board as well. The board had invited him to join, but we need a membership vote on that as well. Jerry Labour, Eleanor Lippman, John Oakes again, Clinton Ives Smullian, Junior, Danielle Trusker, and Jacob Weisberg. So those are the new board members. Thank you all for your votes. And thank you to the proxies for supervising the process by which the members do this thing. I just want to make just a few brief remarks for the last time. I arrived here with about the time that Steve's predecessor was departing, and about 6 months before the economy went into a freefall. And it's a measure of the strength of the staff and the board and the membership of this organisation, our supporters, that despite that, those difficult circumstances, I've actually had a pretty good 3 years. Particularly because one of the first things I had to do, of course, was to participate in the process of picking a successor, and I believe we did a very good job in finding Steve Eisenberg. And I should say we also had to find a new director of finance, and I think we did a pretty good job there too. But I owe, and you owe, a very great deal to Larry Kirschbaum, who was then our executive vice president, and to Stephen Murphy, who went on from our board, by the way, to be the head of Christie's in London. So they're obviously keeping an eye on us and recruiting fine talent from our board. We owe a great debt to them because during that intermediate period, they were very important in holding us together in a period when we actually didn't really have the top level of our management. So we've come through, as I say, with a strong board, with a newly reinvigorated governance system. I won't bore you with the details of that, but actually it's very important to get these things right, and I believe pushed by a number of members of the board, Beth Gutchin, for example, and in a process led by Tony Robinson, another member of the board, we have, I think, got ourselves to a point where all the board members now feel a responsibility for participating not just in the general board membership, but in particular committees doing the work that the board needs to do in order for the organisation to flourish. But that's important but boring, I suppose. But in addition to those necessary boring things, we've strengthened our work in almost every area that we work in, perhaps in all. Free expression, we found new support for translation, we've taken the festival from strength to strength, we've continued our prison writing partnership with the New School, we've looked for new forms of partnership with schools in the city. When I first came to work at Penn, I came to be on the Freedom to Write Committee, and as its chair, I think I witnessed Larry's arrival and the amazing work that he and his team have continued to do. And now that work has the support not only of OSI, but of the Ford Foundation, that support being embodied in First Ford Fellow, but also of other foundations. We've garnered new connections in the foundation world, not all of which have yet led to money, but I believe all of which eventually will. And that means that we've established ourselves, I think, at a new level of significance in the thinking of the foundation world that recognises the importance of what we're doing. And that's, I think, something we should be proud of. Among the funds that we managed to raise are funds that will allow us to revamp the website, and that's a really important thing in these days, and I'm glad that we have Antonio in charge of that process. But the board has been very active in thinking about those things and will be active in guiding it and in input. And as the website develops, there'll be more and more roles for members to participate in shaping what we are in the virtual world, as much as you now shape what we are in what I believe is called meat space. Now, Steve already named all the staff, and I'm not going to do that again, but I do want to say what a great pleasure it has been to work with them all. But I am going to mention Steve, because we've had a terrific time together, because I think we have had a shared vision of what we're up to, which grows from our working together with each other and with the board and the membership and the staff. So I'm honoured to have been your spokesman for these years, proud and admiring of our staff, with whom it's been a great privilege to work, and, let me admit it, relieved to be passing on the baton. Relieved, but also delighted to be leaving you in such capable hands. I'm confident that Peter will be a terrific successor, and with John Trobe as his Executive Vice President, and with Steve as his Executive Director, and with the wonderful staff and the board, and with your support and membership, I know he's in good hands too. So I'd like to thank you all very much and ask you now to welcome Peter. I'm not going to introduce him because you've just voted for him. And if you don't know who he is, then you're shockingly irresponsible. but he will have to have a chance to introduce you to himself. And I'm, as I say, delighted to be handing over to a fellow African. He was born in what's now Zimbabwe. To a great writer, and to be able to go back myself to the study where I now have no excuse not to finish the next book. Peter, welcome.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for voting for me. Cometh the hour, cometh the man, as they say. I'm going to keep my remarks very, very short, because I think this evening is really about Anthony, what's been achieved under his tenure, and I am yet the neophyte president. It's a privilege to assume the presidency of Pan American Center, and I hope to help build on the considerable achievements of Anthony and his predecessors. Penn is obviously the world's oldest literary and human rights organization, and as it approaches its 90th anniversary, in an increasingly interconnected world, and I'm particularly happy to see the website work, because I think it is important in that regard. Penn's mission to encourage and protect writers' freedom of expression has never been more vital, and it is certainly my intention that we keep up that mission indefatigably. I think historians may look back in future years and see the baton passing from Anthony to myself as being the Anglo-African period of Penn American Center. We're both ethnically AAA rated. Anglo-African Ashanti brackets Ashanti, Anglo-African brackets Ashkenazi. So, anyway, I will. Was born and grew up in Africa, and I've had a lot of experience of what happens to societies when they crack down on freedom of expression. And I really do think that writers, the job of writers, the job of authors is incredibly important, and that's why I agreed to take on this position, and I hope that I can do a good job. So thank you for voting for me.
Nothing exotic about me, just a boy from Los Angeles who came east. Well, here's the first event of Super Tuesday of the election of Peter Godwin. The bylaws state that the executive director each year at the annual meeting will give a report, and mine will be brief as it is each year, and then we'll follow with the staff, and then we'll open for questions, and after that, we have cake and champagne. So there we are. 2012 is an important marking. It is the 90th anniversary of the Pan American Center, which celebrates the enduring strength of our founding principles and purposes, the devotion to the cause of free expression, and the promotion of literature. Today is another marking, the transition of our presidency from Anthony Appiah to Peter Godwin. Anthony's 3 years were distinguished by his distinctive and winning style and deeply held commitments to Penn's purposes, which served us so well on so many occasions. Like Anthony, Peter Godwin brings to the post a writer's achievements and sensibilities, and Peter's education and experience in matters of human rights are especially suited to this post. In these two presidents, we have international citizens whose outlooks are so important to understanding the dilemmas of the times in which we live and Penn's place in the work that protects free expression and the place of literature. On behalf of our staff, I offer grateful and admiring thanks to Anthony and our warmest welcome to Peter, and pledge to continue the outstanding working relationship we shared with Anthony. 2011 was another year of vivid accomplishments for the Penn American Center, made all the more satisfying by how we fared amidst economic uncertainties. We could not have achieved our goals without the generous loyalty of our supporters, old and new. 2011 stands out as the year in which we received grants from the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, and Google for the first time, as well as sustaining support from the Open Society Institute and the singular generosity of the Kaplan Foundation. 2011 saw the creation of our first Freedom to Write Fellow. Our trip to China, where we stood in solidarity with our colleagues from the independent Chinese Penn Center on their 10th anniversary, and learned firsthand about the persistence of China's rough hand and attitude toward dissent. We saw the completion of fundraising and plans for what is now underway, the upgrade of our website into the electronic channel and meeting place for all Penn's content, whose enhanced capacities will be an asset to all our programs and will encourage even wider participation in Penn's work. Our vigilance on free expression and confronting the issue of torture, to our flourishing World Voices Festival and Literary Awards, to the special contributions made by our prison writing program, Readers and Writers program, Penn Journal, our translation fund grants. In all, Penn's activities encompassed a wide range of advocacy, creation, translation, recognition, and convocation. Our vibrancy and commitment have showed themselves proudly. Many programs will be summarized today by staff members, but perhaps as an example of all we do, might I add a few words about the Children and Young Adults Committee, who are wonderfully dedicated and spirited, and operate sort of without a staff person assigned to them. You will see on the shelf in the library a plaque which recognizes their work as drum majors in education from the Martin Luther King School in New Orleans, the only school in the 9th Ward to survive Katrina. The Children's and Young Adult Committee have held lively forums with students on subjects such as controversial topics in literature, finding authentic voices for characters, and a conversation with Robert Lipsyte on his essay, Books for Boys. Additionally, this year's Literary Awards in October will feature a new award in memory of Stephen Kroll, who was the chair and longtime member of the Children's and Young Adults Committee, and in his will and through the kindness of his widow, that award has been endowed. 2011 was the first time our fiscal year conformed to the calendar year. It used to be July to July, and now we're like regular humans, June to December. It's a practice we will now carry on. And it is with particular pleasure we can report for the 12 months ending December 31, 2011, based on unaudited figures, but the audit will soon begin, we had $3,171,455 in revenue, $3,157,292 in expenses, and operating surplus of $14,163. Our cash flow remains healthy. Every year begins anew in terms of the necessity of fundraising. It leaves only this small moment of satisfaction and we're right back on the treadmill. But it is with great satisfaction and gratitude we look back to 2011, to the new grants we won, and all in all, how our gala, authors evening, and membership dues, and individual, corporate, and foundational giving and sponsorship brought us a year of fiscal as well as programmatic accomplishment. And that was done in the midst of a difficult economic climate, as you well know. The board has approved a budget for 2012 which projects $3,221,005 in revenue and $3,305,060 in expense, 80,000 of which, for the first time, we've budgeted a contingency. So it's very early in the year, but those are the sort of penciled in framework for 2012. As we did last year, we will assess in June, after the gala and the festival, how things stand, and will make necessary changes to steer toward another year of a balanced budget. It should be noted that following the change in our membership criteria, which widened our embrace of the literary community, we had a 122% increase in new members relative to the increase in membership we saw in the previous period in 2010, albeit we lost a significant number of members who, despite our continuing solicitations, failed to renew. Nothing is as critical to the health and vitality of Penn as our membership, and to see within our ranks not only our longtime members, but to encourage more and more of the young who will shape Penn's future. We pledge this will be at the center of our priorities in 2012 and beyond, and invite your help. And that's why I want to recognize the members of the membership committee who are here tonight, and Jasmine and Paul Morris, because we're going to be pushing all of them to fulfill the promise of opening our membership, our embrace, and what new members mean to the vitality of this organization. What then of our 90th year? I have asked some of the directors give you a brief sense of what is ahead this year. Jakob Borchos as to the festival, Larry Seams on Freedom to Write and international programs, Linda Morgan on Authors Evenings, the Gala, and General Development, and Tony Aiello as to our website, Stacy Lee on Readers and Writers summer programs. As I said, after that, we'll take questions and have some champagne and cake to celebrate Peter and Anthony and 90 years of this organization. Thank you, and may I call on Jakob.
Hi everyone. Speaking of who is more exotic than the other, I'm Hungarian, so nobody can beat that. I'm the fairly new director of the Penn Voices Festival. I started last year, actually, in 2010, in October 2010. So last year was my first festival. This upcoming one is the second, which actually marks the 8th in the series of the festival. Started by Salman Rushdie when Salman was the president of Penn, who is now the chair of the festival. This year, we decided to shift the attention and the scale of the festival a little bit in order to be more efficient in every sense, and also trying to keep the profile as high as it was in the past. We decided to run a somewhat shorter programming. Instead of last year, more than 60 events we're going to have this year, we're going to have 35, 37 events, starting on April 30th. It's a Monday, And the event's going to run throughout the first week of May, so the last event is on Sunday, May 6th. The focus of this year's programming is, I'm not going to bore you with all the details. It's already online, so you'll see all the events. But talking of the general curatorial aspects of the festival, the focus was on to talk about the craft itself, the craft of writing. What constitutes good literature? What are we talking about when we talk about literature, practically? So we asked writers to come and help us to discuss this, rather than discuss their upcoming books. So we curated a series called What to Do with Literature. In it, we'll start with Margaret Atwood talking about the internet, how the internet affected the writer's mind forever. And the next day, Jennifer Egan will talk about the structure and narrative, how structure alternates narrative systems. And the last day is Tony Kushner with Paul Auster talking about the politics as a story. So we're going to have other events too, taking on this curatorial idea. But this is just the kind of like the spine of the 37 events. To give you the sense of the scope of the festival, I'm just going to tell you the talk about the two bookends of the festival. You're going to have a double opening on Monday night, April 30th at WNYC. WNYC has this amazing studio called the Green Space. We do a Christopher Hitchens event. It's not a tribute, it's a debate on Christopher Hitchens' oeuvre with Victor Navarsky of The Nation, Catapolit, also from The Nation, Graydon Carter of Vanity Fair, and George Becker, and the event going to be moderated by Ian Buruma. And this is on Monday night. We asked these people to not only pay tribute to Christopher Hitchens, but really go under the surface and negotiate and debate what he has done and how we evaluate his oeuvre. What harms and what are the harms and what are the merits of his works. So the second opening is on Wednesday, May 2nd, with the Kronos Quartet at the Metropolitan Museum. It's a rare appearance of the Kronos. We asked the Kronos to work with writers who has political relevance. So on stage with the Kronos, they're going to be Tony Kushner, Marjan Satrapi, the Iranian filmmaker, writer, and Rula Jabral, a Palestinian Israeli writer, journalist, author of Mirad, the film which came out last year. The last event of the festival is Sunday, May 6th. It's the traditional Arthur Miller lecture, which this year going to be delivered by Salman Rushdie. So it's the quintessential lecture wrapping up the week-long events of the festival, addressing the most burning issues of freedom and freedom of speech. Together with Salman, after Salman finishing his lecture, they're going to be Gary Steingart coming on stage asking 10 questions about the core nature of freedom, how Salman actually considers freedom in this changing world. So this is pretty much it about the festival. You'll see all the programs online. Not only that, you'll also receive the print brochure soon, which is actually in the printer. Right now, hopefully it's going to be done by the end of next week. And more importantly, make sure to order some tickets and ask us to provide you tickets and come to the openings and all the other events. This is thank you.
Thank you.
Look at that.
In the email. I'm not there yet. It's going to be next year. The hub of the festival from last year is actually, you probably heard about that. We moved the festival downtown, so there's Standard New York, which actually acquired a new building in the East Village. So both buildings going to be serving us as a festival hub, which is important in a city like New York. And the High Line. So the High Line and the two standards building going to be our home. So if you have any questions, you're more than happy to
We'll save all the questions. Thank you. Mary Seams, our Director of Freedom to Write and International Program.
Before I do a quick wrap up and look forward, I just want to give a personal note of thanks to Anthony. I came here to take this job in 2001, and Anthony was one of the big reasons I decided to take the job. He was chairing the Freedom to Write program here, and I knew his work. I knew his work with the Freedom to Write program here, and I really look forward to the opportunity to learning from him. And so we've been working together for what, 11 years? 11 years. And I just some of the things, Anthony's perception, his wisdom, his impeccable judgment, his great empathy that enables him to sense the forces that are at work on all sides of the conflict, and an ability to explain to the world what we're doing and why we're doing it in ways that explain it to me in a newer and clearer way. You couldn't ask for a better leader for an organization, and so I just want to take a moment to give a personal tribute to a really great president. So the last year is the 15th or 16th year I've been doing Freedom to Write work for Penn, and it's easily the most vexing and confounding year that I've ever had in this job, and I think Penn has ever had. I'll give you a little sort of framework to sort of one of the ways that I measure these things. A week after we met last year, this group of Islamic countries that for 12 years have been pushing at the UN to get new laws banning defamation of religion dropped that initiative. They said, no, we're not going to do it anymore. And that Hillary Clinton was sort of influential in brokering a deal with the Pakistanis. Penn had worked very hard to fight that initiative. We don't want laws that ban blasphemy. So that was sort of a great victory. We had done a program in September of 2010 at Geneva for the delegates of the Human Rights Council. That was influential, I think, in moving the needle on that discussion. So that seemed like a very significant victory. But in the last month and a half, there's been this series of things that have happened that have called into question what kinds of gains we made. Salman Rushdie was prevented from going to the Jaipur Book Festival when there were supposedly threats on his life. A week later, Taslima Nasreen, the Bangladeshi novelist who lives in Mumbai, was prevented from traveling to another part of India for a book launch because she too was getting death threats. And then about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we heard about a blogger and writer in Saudi Arabia named Hamza Kashgari. And Hamza Kashgari had marked the anniversary of the Prophet by sending out some tweets sort of exploring his crisis of faith, saying, I wish we could just talk man to man. I wish we could, I love you sometimes, I hate you sometimes, I wish we could talk man to man. And within minutes, he was getting very, very serious death threats, a huge backlash. He left the country. Friends told him, you don't need a visa, you can go to Jordan and then take a flight to Malaysia, and then you can connect to New Zealand and ask for political asylum. He got as far as Malaysia, he needed to wait a day, and when he went back to the airport to fly to New Zealand, the Malaysians arrested him, and the Saudis went through extradition proceedings. And we spent about 24 frantic hours trying to press the Malaysians not to return him to Saudi Arabia. We failed. The Saudis sent a private jet, flew him back home, and he's now in prison in Riyadh on apostasy charges, which are possible death sentence charges. And that looks very discouraging on the surface. But then about a week later, we got a visit in the office by a man named Abdullah Hamid Adib. And Abdullah Hamid Adib is about 45 years old. And it turns out that this guy Kashgari had been part of a discussion group in Riyadh that met in a bookstore, and they talked about faith. And Kashgari, who actually is an atheist, would come to these meetings and openly discuss his questions about faith. And there were faithful people who were there, and they would have a lively debate. And this guy, Hamid Adin, was the elder who was leading these discussions. As soon as Kashgari was arrested, the people started saying, well, we need to get the leader too, the teacher who's corrupting the youth. So he has a passport that allows him to travel freely to England. He stopped here on the way to England, and he came in and met with us. the more we talked, the more it became clear that what we're seeing on the top, on the surface, is this backlash, but underneath it all is this movement forward. You know, and it was that kind of view, I think, that sort of, in a year that was the most difficult day by day for freedom of expression. Again and again, we had that experience where on the surface things look very grim, and underneath it, when you begin to look at it, you see that what's really happening is that's the backlash against a real positive movement. We saw that in China. Steve mentioned, you know, we went on this trip in July, partly in response to the fact that there had been a major crackdown in January, which had rounded up, you know, some members. I remember last year talking about Yedu, who's the independent Chinese Penn Center webmaster, who had been arrested at that time. We went. It was a difficult trip. We had a meeting at the U.S. Embassy, which the ambassador invited 15 of our colleagues to come. Only 3 were able to come because the police visited the other, 12, and said you can't attend the meeting. But while we were there, at the very end of the meeting, or the very end of the week, you will have read about the high-speed train crash in China, where 2 high-speed trains crashed into each other. And within 4 days, Chinese people had sent out 25 million tweets protesting the way the government handled the situation, making the government dig up train cars that had buried, fire public officials. And it was, you know, one of a series of things that happened during the year that made clear that the situation for freedom of expression is changing significantly month by month in China. And that's what the Chinese government is reacting to. I think what was really striking about that experience, we came back and we told that story. We said, you know, there's this, but there's also this that's happening on the ground. Our own members are experiencing it. They say it's a much more complex situation than the world is seeing. We were able to tell that story to Congress. Anthony testified at Congress. Marion Botsford Fraser, who's the head of the Freedom to Write, or the Writers in Prison Committee of International PEN, told that story. We'll be telling it again this year when Sarah is sort of leading a really interesting 4-year retrospective report on freedom of expression in China that's going to have contributions from 10 major Chinese writers about their perception of this very complicated and very dynamic situation. Again, I think what was really interesting is, you know, getting a really good sense of how the role that writers are playing on the ground in these countries, and their feeling that they're making progress even under very difficult circumstances. We went to Mexico, where all the journalists have, you know, where dozens of journalists have been killed. This was a full-page ad that PEN International placed in a Mexican newspaper in solidarity with Mexican journalists, signed by 170 writers, including all the living Nobel Literature laureates. The impact of that statement by a group of writers in Mexico was enormous. So one of the things that we're really looking at is the role that PEN plays on the ground in these countries where there's, you know, where there are real free expression challenges. Steve mentioned Deji, our Freedom to Write Fellow, funded by the Ford Foundation. One of the aspects of the grant is really specifically to work with PEN centers in targeted countries where the writers are really doing something on the ground. Deji's working with centers in Haiti, South Africa, and we're looking at the PEN Center in Russia. Steve and I will be visiting the PEN Center in Russia in the coming week to sort of evaluate what their situation is in that also very complicated landscape. Just a couple more notes. The really bright spot this year is Burma. You have to say, you know, we have to give credit to, you know, a really remarkable transformation. A transformation that brought the release of 2 of our honorary members, people that we've been working on for a long time. Sarah says 3, I'm sorry. Zargana, the comedian, who Sarah had lunch with and Jakob had lunch with here in New York about 2 weeks ago. And Nafon Lott, who was our Barbara Goldsmith Award winner last year, who was released just in January. So I think, you know, for the coming year, we're going to be going back to Geneva to wrestle again about religious defamation and the right to question religious orthodoxies. We're working on with International PEN an International PEN Declaration on Digital Freedom, which is sort of a statement of guiding principles from PEN on freedom of expression in the internet. And then one last thing that we're doing at home that I think I'd just like to send out a quick exhortation to everybody to join in. When you think about countries that have come out of abuse, periods of human rights abuse, one of the most significant forces in helping countries get through those sort of periods of reflection and reconciliation are writers. They're the ones who tell the stories, they're the ones who push the story, and they get people to reflect about how we all had some level of complicity. Think about post-war German literature and how that moved the discussion from it was us and those bad Nazis to how did we as a society allow this to happen. In the United States, we're doing a lot of work about accountability for human rights abuses since the September 11th attacks, particularly accountability for torture. And we've been working, I hope you've heard about it, with this really cool film project with Doug Lyman, the director of The Born Identity, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which grows out of a series of staged readings of the formerly classified documents that Penn has done called Reckoning with Torture. We have just launched a national call for everyone to find these documents. They're at this website. Grab a postcard, just reckoningwithtorture.org, download a document, and shoot a video of yourself reading one of the documents, and then just upload it to the site. And we're gonna, Doug is gonna collect hundreds, thousands of these clips and pull them all into just sort of a national performance of these documents. It's a very moving project. If you have any, just grab a postcard. If you have any questions on how to do it, I want to just pay tribute to one more person, who's Levi Kleinbard in the back, who's who's the sort of production manager for this amazing program, and just drop an email to her, and she'll help you to shoot a video and get your testimony up there as well. So I think that's everything. Again, thank you very much to Sarah and Deji and Layli who make all this happen. And welcome to Peter. I'm really excited to have you. Thank you.
Linda Morgan, our Director of Development.
I'll try to be as brief as possible because I think fundraising is, well, a wretched subject, but very necessary. And in that way, I want to thank you, Anthony, so much for being such an amazing help. He doesn't even know how much he's been a help because he allows us to forge his name and quote him, write notes, and his signature that approaches his. And we look forward to doing the same. We don't have his permission yet, but seriously, Anthony has embodied the mission of Penn to defend free expression, to promote literature, and to provide a more informed and enlightened worldview. And you can't ask for more than that from a philosopher and a professor. It's been remarkable. And again, Peter, we're excited about having you come. Steve Eisenberg has been an amazing partner for me for fundraising. He's really, we haven't had anyone as an executive director really who's been able to do as much, so that's been terrific. But the main thing is we work with a wonderful staff, and it's the staff that does the programming that allows us to raise the money from foundations and corporations and individuals through events and sponsorships. And I also want to thank you, the engaged membership. It's the writers who care about the world that allow us to compete successfully for funding. So thank you.
Antonio Aiello, our website master.
I'll try and keep this brief too. Basically what we do at the website is trying to communicate what Penn does, our mission, our dual mission to promote literature and defend free expression to the broadest audience possible. And we do that by taking Penn programming and disseminating it through the website. We put up literary features that showcase translations from around the world, our literary award winners, our prison writing program, and also advocacy campaigns and individual cases that show what PEN does on the ground. And what we hope to do, and we've been able to do this relatively well over the past several years, but a lot of that information is getting lost now. And as we accumulate more and more information and more content and more engaging content, we're starting to lose touch with how that content relates to other elements. And so really the website overhaul is going to allow us to create a broader level of transparency that hasn't existed yet for the organization, which will allow us to, in turn, show the world what we do and how we do it, but also let us bring in the members to participate a little bit more. And I think what we'd like to be able to do is to create resources so that our campaigns, our literary programming can be disseminated by the members. And so people, when they come to the website, they can easily find stuff that they're looking for, share it through social media, and move on. And I think that's probably the biggest gift that we can do. Things that you can look forward to, hopefully we'll be launching a new website this fall. We'll be hopefully having a beta test up by August and hopefully be launching it to the public in the fall. Things that will go along with that will be a 90th anniversary retrospective. We'll be putting up a history through a timeline and oral narratives of past PEN presidents and members and board members that tell the narrative of PEN through the years, but also through artifacts that we found through the archives. And so we'll have an interactive timeline, we'll have documentation from the archives, and hopefully some events that haven't been heard or seen before. And that's kind of it. Well, so we put up our first element from the timeline today, which is from the 20s. And so from this timeline, we have the origination letters from Galsworthy asking the first PEN members to start the PEN Club in New York City in 1922. Then we have the organization list of the original members that started the first PEN Club in 1922. We found really in the 1920s, PEN was more not concerned, but they really believed that a fellowship of writers could do the best by breaking down international barriers by just meeting and sharing ideas and getting together and kind of not meeting with politics in mind, but really getting to know each other and really passing on literary works and information. In the 1930s, that started to fall apart with the rise of nationalism. From the archives, what we did find was some amazing documentation from the 1933 Congress in Dubrovnik, which took place right after the May book burnings in Germany, and after a broad group of German writers were expelled from the German PEN Center. We have an impassioned speech by Ernst Toller that I don't think has seen the light of day in probably 6 decades. We have the notes from H.G. Wells about that Congress. We have resolutions that were passed by introduced and passed by the American PEN Center, which kind of laid the groundwork for what became the charter for international PEN. So these are all documents and artifacts that will be coming to light and telling the narrative of what PEN does today and the work that we do, but also putting into context to see how we've evolved, how writers, this ragtag group of writers from the 1920s has evolved into a literary league of nations, which is what they call themselves. They would carry out the work of defending free expression, around the world. They would have a say in who the Nobel Peace Prize winner is, with Liu Xiaobo, that would be able to help save and earn the freedom of writers who've been imprisoned for simply expressing their views. So I think it's a big deal, and I think we're bringing this to a broader audience is going to hopefully show people and PEN in a new light that hasn't really been seen before.
Stacy Lee, you'll be our last speaker, and she, of course, is our director of our Readers and Writers program.
Good evening. Also, in the spirit of brevity, I have numbers for you from this past year of Readers and Writers program. I'm glad to say that we were able to produce 3 public discussion programs for our audiences, which are New York City public high school students and their teachers. And they included a panel entitled Borough Barrio Block, New York Neighborhoods and How They Got That Way, And that event, as well as the readings and the lectures that happened during the festival, were interactive, allowing students to ask questions directly of authors, share their opinions, and have books signed and have one-on-one. In the term time, we also provided here in this very space 7 writing workshops. 3 of them were creative writing, 4 of them were college application essay workshops, focusing specifically on discovering your own story in order to be able to tell it in a way that will make schools understand all that you have to offer as an emerging woman or man in educated company. And one of our workshop students is my intern this year. Larry's in the back, and he is going through the process of applications and acceptances, so make sure to ask him where he is on his road before the end of the evening. We also had our Summer Writing Institute. That is when students come by way of application and interview to work with us over the course of 8 weeks. This past summer, I should say, we were able to offer 16 writing workshops with guests from the professional realms of literature, be they booksellers, editors. We've even had a futurist come and talk to the students, along with professional writing instructors. We had 32 readers groups, which are small gatherings where students get to talk about literature from a personal perspective, as well as mentored office hours, and 16 literary expeditions to different points in the 5 boroughs that allowed the students to take on the posture of a writer, whether in an audience or writing based on a site-specific project. And we're going to be doing the same again this year. The only thing that is going to be added is manuscript clinics, when students will be allowed to come in on one Friday of the month and show what they've got to an adult who will read it and give them senses of next steps with their own writing. And that will be open to all students. So just more of the same. Thank you.
Surely you can tell, even in that brevity, the professionalism and dedication of each and every member of this staff. Just a couple things for going to questions. Linda wants to say that fundraising is wretched, and I know just what she means. The non-wretched part is that when we can have 27 authors' evenings where people come and are hosted by a member of PEN or another and can be in the close company of an author in a home, once in a while in a club or restaurant, and can see emblematically what PEN is, how the writer is at the center. And here's something about PEN, I believe, are the greatest goodwill gainers of anything we do. I talk afterwards to every host and hostess and every author, and it really is extraordinary. Many of the things for which we're funded are very specific. So the magic words to Robin, Linda, and myself are general support, because that's what it takes to have an organization like this. And to put on our gala at the Natural History Museum, the scale that it is, and a darn good time, is another thing that Linda and our development committee, it may be wretched the path to get there, but once there, it's a wonderful evening and is one of the ways by which we get the red corpuscles that make this work. I had a meeting here earlier in the year with all but 2 of the living ex-presidents of PEN to draw their ideas and have them think about what we should do in this 90th anniversary. And I believe the oldest living one is Tom Fleming, who said after the hour with us and with meeting our staff, when he was president in the early 70s, he said this was like a club. It was like a dinner club. It was just sort of, it was original. He said it's got so much now. We do so much. And he was rather thrilled to come here. And I was terrifically pleased. And of course, he told us these wonderful stories of his time in PEN, including Pablo Neruda coming here. And so I asked Antonio and Chuck, Larry often sits in, we're going to interview every living ex-president of Penn, and then some other members. Imagine the richness that's going to be up on the website for people to come to. Just last week, you may know that what funded this upgrade, which we've really wanted to do, we have a very old, creaky, limited platform, you can tell that. But we went to the Carnegie Foundation, and Vartan Gregorian, who runs it, many of you know, love certainly, said that he would give us a $50,000 challenge grant, which we have matched by two of our members, one very largely on the board. And so that work is underway. Antonio only refers to it in a second, but it's a lot of work to remake it's probably like having your kitchen done in New York. Which is probably the worst thing that you've ever done.
While you're living in the apartment.
Well, living in the
While your wife is the architect.
Keep these conflicts out of here. Bob and I were at Oxford millions of years ago together, and his wife is the architect for the kitchen that we're going to redo. Maybe God will rescue me and take me out of the house during all this. But this is a really, really big undertaking. But imagine what it's going to be like in terms of what people are going to be able to go to and see that are in our archives at Princeton and things that we have here. These documents, Emma and people run in with me every few days and say, take a look at this. Here's where E.B. White wants to resign from Penn because he doesn't want to go to any more dinner. And he sort of says, that's all you do, so I want to be out of here. Or John Updike congratulating the Farrar of Farrar, Straus, and Giroux on accepting the presidency that he, Updike, turned down. So you've taken a job, both of you, that John Updike wasn't up to. And this is and very, very important documents as to the sort of history of Penn, and so 90 will lead us on to 100. So I want you to know that Peter will come to know, but Anthony and I know so well, the depth of the dedication and professionalism of our staff. And because he wouldn't advertisements for myself, I think I will do it, and then open to questions. And I said, once we're past questions, let's drink, let's have that cake. Spoil your dinner, it's okay. Larry Seams, we're talking about conflicts now, published from OR Books, who our own very treasurer and board member and head of the chair of the membership committee, John Oakes, created and runs. Larry Seams, in conjunction with the ACLU, spent months in what he has told me is probably the greatest examination of a freedom to write request, the documents that follow the post-11 incarcerations, and now producing something called the Torture Report, which I hold here in my hand. And we're tremendously proud of Larry's achievement in this. And I will post as soon as I learn the exact air date, but Bill Moyers, just a few days ago, spent an hour interviewing Larry and Doug Lyman, the director of the film on the Torture Project, and that show will air. Bill's settling on a date, either at the end of March or sometime in May. I think it'll probably be one of the most important amplifications of what we do in the public media that's ever been done. Bill Moyers, a great friend of Penn's, very moved about hearing about this project. He's interviewed both of them, but I'll post it on the website so that you all know when it's to be filmed. And so we thank you for being here. Peter, the helm is yours, and I've got the con, and I'm now open for questions, whatever you wish. And yes.
it is stated that membership criteria changed. I wondered what changed and when did it change?
It was changed earlier this year. It went from requiring 2 books to requiring only 1 book. And especially in this age, we started to think, how long does it take for young people to be published, and why should we wait for a second book? And the rules for a play, it doesn't have silly things in it, like you have to have written a play that was performed before more than 132 seats in a place that was very well lit. So it just, it is a wider embrace as well of those who we have let in before but really are welcoming, and that is all those who are in the literary professional community, agents and editors, publicists, scouts, because what the board felt very strongly was, and indeed our membership committee who led the way, was the first thing we want to know about somebody who would be a PEN member is, do they care about and believe in what is our mission? And if they believe and care about the defense of free expression wherever it is endangered and the promotion of literature, then we want them by our side.
Well, I thank you because I was able to join because of my work.
Good. 3 more of you. Yeah.
Concerning freedom of expression, I'm a member of the National Committee for American Foreign Policy, and there is a big problem. I would like to know how you circumvent that, because my husband is specialized in Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and so on. Now, we are always, my husband says, don't talk about human rights, don't talk about human rights, because those dictators are paranoid. They think when you talk about human rights, you want to overthrow the government, you want to overthrow them. And since we often work together with Washington, they keep quiet on this. We are the unofficial porte-parole. But don't mention that too much, because the reaction is that they block them, and they get paralyzed, and we try to open them up first, and then eventually, but it has to be something we cannot really